Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel and podcast. It is Wimbledon Men's 2024 final preview and prediction time, and I am with.
Hi guys, it's Ash here.
And we've just witnessed the women's final, so keep an eye and an ear out for that. We will be doing a separate podcast on that later today after we've gone through the press conferences with both Paolini and Krejcikova. But this podcast is focused on a rematch of the 2023 Wimbledon final between Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic. History always on the line when Djokovic is in a final. And for Alcaraz, it seems like a similar thing as well. He is looking for a fourth Grand Slam title. Carlos Alcaraz looking to defend his Wimbledon title. And for Novak Djokovic, he's looking for an eighth Wimbledon title and a 25th Slam. So a lot on the line, and the head-to-head is 3-2 in favour of Novak. So, yeah, head-to-head on the line. Can Carlos equal it and win? Or will it be Djokovic to edge in front in that head-to-head? Before we get into the nuts and bolts, I mean, you kind of talked to the media, the media weekend, Ash, as well, and you've watched them, obviously would have watched them throughout the last couple of weeks. And what are your initial thoughts about this matchup?
I'm excited for the rematch, that's for sure. I think both players have performed well throughout the tournament. Djokovic, obviously concerns going into the tournament with the knee surgery, but I think he's looked really good, moved really well, and has come through his matches fairly comfortably. I think I'd say one area of concern is I don't feel he's been tested too much, certainly not as much as I think Carlos has. And I know he hasn't played a top five player since the Australian Open potentially, so it's been a while. I think Carlos has looked really good, came through well against Medvedev. Djokovic did well against Musetti, who was on a really good bit of form and was building momentum going into that semi. But yeah, super excited for the rematch and hard one to call for sure.
Yeah, no, agreed. It's going to be look. I mean, it's going to be what everyone's talking about. I think on Sunday, and some people might say the Euro 2024 final, but I think look. I mean, this
Carlos might,
is
Carlos
yeah,
might.
Carlos might say that exactly. But look, I mean, we're very much looking forward to watching it tomorrow, and also looking forward to the press conferences as well. Hopefully, we can get a question in either with Carlos or Novak, depending who wins or loses. Will be in both, but as you said, the route to this stage or the route to the final for both players has been a bit different. I think Alcaraz has been slightly tougher. He's faced Medvedev, Tommy Paul. I mean, TFO hasn't been in great form, but he put up a great fight against Alcaraz. Seems to match up quite nicely. Stylistically, can cause him issues. And then for Djokovic, I mean, apart from Holger Rune, I would say, and he hasn't been tested, as you said, and Ash, because Musetti, yes, in good form, but he hadn't really faced anyone of real note coming into this. There are some good players. Pericard, who I interviewed in qualies, massive serving Frenchman, 100 plus aces going into it. He was, the best serving player on tour at Wimbledon, but he's very raw. He was, I think, struggling a bit physically as well. So definitely hasn't been I would say, a particularly tough route for Djokovic. And the De Minaur, I think, withdrawal actually helped him because it meant that he could rest even more with the knee, which, it has been slightly surprising. And I know he mentioned in the press conference that we had yesterday with him, he mentioned and said, look, I know you guys are saying about the knee, but Taylor Fritz came back quicker. And he says, I keep on saying it. And he's right. So, we'll put our hands up and say, fine, we get that. But I think there's a difference between coming back and being able to play. I think Taylor played 3 matches at Wimbledon, whenever it was, a year ago, 2 years ago, or 3 years ago. For Djokovic, he's now made the final. If he goes on to win the tournament, I mean, how impressive is that? So definitely looking good, but as you said, hasn't been tested. This is going to be not just a litmus test. This is going to be the, I think, ultimate test right now for Djokovic, because how does he hold up physically? And not just physically, but I think potentially mentally as well against Carlos, because Carlos beat him here last year. He won the first set so comfortably, and then Carlos just managed to kind of gain control in part of that match. So, yeah, a lot to dissect, which we can do now. I mean, what are your memories of that of last year's final, Ash, and kind of what do you think in terms of the way it played out?
I think it was a real turning point in terms of men's tennis, because I think a lot of people thought Djokovic was invincible at Wimbledon, and no one expected Carlos, I think, really to win with it going to 5 sets. I think there was a feeling that if it was going to go all the way, it'd be Djokovic. A lot of people said Carlos had to win the first set to win that match. He didn't. He got beat quite badly in that first set, 6-1, but recovered and kind of Djokovic in a way. So I think in terms of the confidence that Alcaraz would have taken from that match was huge, and we've seen him go from strength to strength really since that final. Obviously, winning the French Open a few weeks ago, and I think he'll be really high on confidence going into this one. We saw him practicing earlier. He looked really relaxed, looked really comfortable out on the grass. I think he's been tested in this tournament, a lot of four-setters, but he's problem solved really well, and I think he'll be really, really high on confidence going into the final. Djokovic, we always say that perhaps, the fact that he's had a walkover, not necessarily been tested that much, that could help in terms of, not having that many excruciatingly long games going into the final. But on the flip side, you look at it, and Carlos has had plenty of time on the grass, and he feels really confident out there. Djokovic, it would be really interesting, I think, to see how his match against De Minaur would have gone. So it was a shame to miss out on that. But yeah, I do think Alcaraz will be super high on confidence, and excited to see how he goes about beating Djokovic this time.
Yeah, no, I agreed, and it's interesting because when we talked to him earlier this week, well, it was when he won actually against Medvedev, and yesterday even, or the day before, and he said, "Look, I know what to expect from Djokovic." So they asked him, "What do you think?" And he said, "Look, I've played him now 5 times, so I know what to expect. And I played him here last year, and he has this air of confidence about him, which." I think Djokovic does too, in all honesty. But I do think Djokovic is wary of Alcaraz. And that's kind of the feeling I got a little bit in the press conference that we had with him. And he doesn't really show all his cards, Djokovic, as you would expect. But he knows that this is going to be a tough test, especially given what's happened with the knee. So let's see how it pans out. There's obviously some similarities between Alcaraz and Nadal making the French Open, or winning the French Open, Roland Garros, and also making the final here at Wimbledon. And Nadal did that in 2008 for the first time, and then went on to win the Olympics. If Alcaraz was to achieve something like that, which he's only done one out of three so far even, then it would be an incredible feat. But we were saying when we were watching him that he does have, and Djokovic has mentioned it, just these attributes, these small little attributes taken from the big three. And they're not necessarily exactly the same, but you can see it. You can see the variation that he has. You can see he's most likely studied them, and whoever's coached him, either it's a coincidence, or they've said, look, this is how you can play. These are the best to do it. Look at how they do it. So yeah, I mean, he's very liked, I think, here. And before we talk about tactically, I think from a crowd point of view, I think the crowd is going to be majority with Alcaraz, despite Djokovic being a 7-time champion, just because everyone seems to love Alcaraz. Whoever I talk to in terms of working here, or generally just the general public, of course, the crowd were booing Djokovic. I think during the Runa match, I don't think he was booed, and I know there's whole the hoopla, but if he was, and I was in the stadium, so I might not have heard a section of the crowd that was booing, and maybe they were. They shouldn't be booing. I think that's fair to say. And then the issue was that yesterday when he won, he did the violin celebration, which is for his daughter, and then they booed him, and he basically lapped it up and said, "Come on, more," and really just fed on it. And you almost wonder whether the crowd actually might help him out tomorrow. If they really go big for Alcaraz, Djokovic might just mould himself into the pantomime villain, and then just it'll give him that extra 5-10%, I think, in honesty, in the tank. But look, you mentioned it, and we can talk about more tactically. Alcaraz has this uncanny ability to be able to match Djokovic or even exceed Djokovic physically. And that's an issue. And Sinner did a similar thing at the Australian Open. Obviously, a different style of player, but he managed to do it. He kind of outlasted Djokovic. He won those longer rallies, which Djokovic is so used to winning. And he outmaneuvered Djokovic, which is what Djokovic is so good at doing, right? He makes you make a mistake. He plays the match on his terms. Alcaraz turned that Wimbledon final for the first set and started to really just turn the screw. He also had a fantastic serving day, and that's going to be really key, I think. And every player that I've talked to on the men's side, especially, every time they win or they lose, all of them say the serve is key. I asked Tommy Paul, why do you think you lost? So he won the first set against Alcaraz. What happened from the second set onwards? He said, I didn't serve well enough. He said, I didn't serve well enough, and Carlos played first strike tennis better than me. So fine. And Medvedev, interviewed him in the presser, same thing. I need to serve so well against Alcaraz. So interestingly, Djokovic and Alcaraz, I haven't heard them say it. And maybe because they've got so many different ways of playing, they're fantastic returners. They have maybe a bit more confidence in their game on grass. That's why. But look, we know that serve on grass is it's a key aspect. And one thing that Djokovic has done really well this tournament is serve well. So that's going to be big for Novak, I think. He can't, in my opinion, and I'll talk about tactically and I'll get your thoughts on it, I don't think tactically he can afford to have the points go longer than 8 shots, 10 shots, consistently anyway. He's going to win some of those points. Of course he will. He's Novak Djokovic and he'll be able to dig deep at times. But I just think Alcaraz, he will get into some sort of rhythm. And one thing that I've actually heard from a lot of people who have practiced with Novak, and this is going to sound so weird, they say that practicing with Novak is really nice. And the reason why is because his ball quality is fantastic and it's consistent. But it doesn't have... with Rafa, I think people say they struggle because it's got that raging topspin and it's really awkward sometimes, especially when he practices. I think he practices pretty high intensity as well. They struggle kind of feel comfortable in their ground strokes. With Federer, he'd flatten it out, right? With Novak, it's almost like the perfect way to hit it. You feel like that's kind of biomechanically, maybe I'm not a biomechanical expert, but you feel like that's kind of where it's at. And you just wonder, can Novak mix it up enough against Alcaraz to make him feel super uncomfortable? Because Djokovic is all about being precise and being able to outmaneuver, outlast, be the one to have the better shot tolerance in matches. But against Carlos, I don't think, and at the ATP Tour Finals he was fantastic, but we're talking about grass here. On grass, I don't think at the moment he can make him feel super uncomfortable. And I think the same, for Alcaraz, I think Alcaraz needs to utilize what is at his disposal, like his variety. The one thing that Djokovic does have, though, the serve, he's serving really well, as I said, and also coming forward to the net. And he's served and volleyed really well this week and the last week, and generally his net game is much improved. So he needs to try and shorten the points, be aggressive with the forehand, mix it up with a backhand slice as well, because Carlos, will otherwise, as Medvedev said in his presser, just press forward, attack. And as good a defender as Djokovic is, I just don't think the longer points are going to suit him. So the game is going to be won on the shorter points, and Novak needs to return well, and he's the best returner of all time. There's no disputing that. So if he can start to make Alcaraz feel uncomfortable in his service games, it will, one, relieve pressure on his own serve, but also it'll make Alcaraz have to either go for more, get closer to the lines, really have to think about what he's doing in terms of his serve, and we know that he can sometimes fluctuate on that. And even on his forehand as well. I was talking to Steve Flink here, and he said, and I said to him, look, with Alcaraz's forehand, it can sometimes go hot and cold, and if that happens, Djokovic will take over. So I think if Alcaraz is playing near his best level, I think he wins. I don't know how close it's going to. I'll come back to that in a second. But if they both play their best level right now, I think Alcaraz wins. But if Alcaraz if his level is even a little bit below what it should be, I think Novak will take over and I think he'll win. That's kind of how I see it. I feel like it's a 60-40 split in favour of Alcaraz. And Djokovic is the prime candidate to prove someone wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So he might come out and just blitz Alcaraz, and Alcaraz won't know what hit him, and he'll completely make me look stupid. But I don't know. I have a feeling that Carlos is going to do something special tomorrow, and I don't think it's going to be straight sets. I don't think it's going to be 4 sets. I think it might even be 5 sets. But I just think he'll come out on top. Enough of me talking. What do you think, Ash, in terms of the matchup?
Yeah, my prediction's the same. I think Alcaraz in 5. I think you mentioned Djokovic coming to the net. I think his volleying's got to be
Precise,
top notch because, I mean, all of Alcaraz's shots are so good, but for me, what stands out about him the most is his athleticism, his ability to chase down balls and then hit unbelievable passing shots and
just shots, lobs, all sorts.
All sorts. He's got every trick in the book. His drop shot is unbelievable, and I think he will use that tomorrow. It's strange though because you do see so many similarities between the two of them. You know, we talk about. I mentioned Alcaraz's athleticism. Djokovic's athleticism is one of the best we've ever seen.
Yeah.
So I think it's hugely intriguing, and as you say, it almost depends on which Djokovic turns up because, as you say, he is capable of starting brilliantly and blitzing Alcaraz, but I just feel the way Alcaraz has been playing ever since the French Open, he just means business, and he seems really established now and comfortable with where he is. He knows he can beat Djokovic at Wimbledon. He knows he's one of the best there is right now, and he's still so young, but having that confidence. I know in the media weekend before the tournament started, one of the questions they asked about was, have you been studying? You know, last year he studied Djokovic's game to see how he could implement changes into his own game going into Wimbledon, and he was like, "No, I've been watching clips of myself last year." So he's got that confidence in his ability, which he didn't have last year necessarily, but the win has given him that, and I think that level of confidence he'll take that into the final and use it to his advantage. But yeah, you can never count on Djokovic. The guy has won so many titles here. If anyone could beat Alcaraz, it's him.
Yeah, and especially coming back from. We were talking about the injury earlier. Like, if anyone is going to be able to do something like that, it's Novak Djokovic, and you could say maybe Nadal as well potentially. But on grass, Novak Djokovic, right? I think it's fair to say. And look, he's the greatest of all time. I think it's fair to say.
This would be number 25.
I mean, it's just phenomenal, right? So, and the things we're talking about, athleticism. And when you said that, I was just thinking, but he's 37 years old.
Yeah.
So, this kid. He's now 21, Alcaraz? This 21-year-old should physically be better than this 37-year-old. And I think the issue is that the majority of the tour are still not. They still can't physically match Novak because he's just kept himself so good physically. He just kept himself so just pristine in terms of his preparation. We were watching him yesterday, his warm up, like me and Liam watching him warming up. Takes his time, really goes through just immaculate, just stretching, pulling whatever he needs to do, right? Hand-to-eye coordination skills before he goes on court. Most of these players, I haven't seen them do it to the same rigor. I just haven't. And Novak is just one of those not even a lifetime, just once in a sport athletes, honestly. And he's phenomenal. And look, I mean, he knows he's got his work cut out for him. I think he mentioned that. And, you talking about Alcaraz watching himself is quite funny. But I guess he's probably thinking, well, I won last year, so why not watch myself? And, he did a few things really well last year, generally throughout the tournament. And he implemented it in Queens last year, which is a backhand slice. I think it's so... I wouldn't say it's the best slice on tour, but it's up there. It's a potent weapon. He uses it defensively. He can use it as an attacking weapon. He actually slices really well down the line, which is a really tough shot to hit. And we were watching him and his brother, have a slice battle. His brother, by the way, is very good. If you guys haven't seen him hit, and obviously, I don't think Carlos is going 100% here, but yeah, his brother is no slouch. And we're talking about his older brother. His younger brother, I think, is a star in the making apparently. But look, it's going to be such an intriguing final. I can't wait for it, and it's going to be won or lost. I think with the serve, with the physicality of the points. Who can Novak come up with a different game plan and implement it? Because it's easy for us to say, "Oh, keep the points short." And what does that mean? Well, that entails going bigger. He already goes pretty close to the lines. Going even bigger with his forehand, with backhand, which means he can make more errors. He can open himself up more to more break points. He can really let Alcaraz come on. And also, it means him coming forward more to the net. You mentioned it, right? Lobs, passing shots. Novak can do that too, fine. But Alcaraz at the moment, I think, is the physical beast, right, on tour. And not only is he a physical beast, but he's able to then do something incredible when he gets there. The running forehands, the sliding backhand. Novak said after the Wimbledon Final last year. So it's just a question, I think, of what level does Alcaraz bring, I think, tomorrow. And if he brings a level, I'm going to be honest, the level that he brought against Medvedev, I don't think that's good enough to beat Djokovic.
Agreed, yeah.
And Carlos did say that wasn't his best match of the tournament. The only thing that could be worrying if you're a Carlos fan is normally they start to peak towards the end of the tournament. I mentioned this yesterday. I won't worry too much. I just think we might see a first set where Djokovic might win it. And then I think from there, it'll be interesting to see what Carlos does. Because he lost the first set to Medvedev as well. But I can imagine a couple of tiebreakers. I can imagine a potentially tight match. But let's see. I mean, it will be amazing to sit here tomorrow and sit down after the match. And you know what? We could easily sit here and say we were completely wrong.
Yeah.
Novak wins in straight sets. And he just comes out and puts together an absolute masterclass tactically. And, that's why we are doing what we're doing. And these guys are getting paid to do what they're doing. Because they obviously know what they're about. And how to execute the game plans. And Novak isn't just a great tennis player, but he's a great tactician. Medvedev is the same as well. And I think, Carlos, we maybe haven't heard it from him as much, but he knows. He's talking about studying people, and he's, we were watching him today as well. There's little things that Ferrer says to him quietly, and you can tell Alcaraz is taking it on board. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a great match to watch, no doubts. And I think, yeah, both of us are going for Carlos in 5. Let us know in the comments section what your prediction is and why as well. And not just the winner, but in terms of sets. Is there anything you want to touch on before we wrap it up?
No, I don't think so. Just super excited. I'd say I'm even more excited about this final than the last final, just because seeing Alcaraz beat Djokovic and end the streak.
Yeah.
It sets it up nicely this year.
Well, is it going to be redemption? Is it going to be revenge? Or is it going to be repeat? They always say that in boxing. Is it repeat or revenge when there's a rematch? And that's kind of what you feel like it's going to be, right? And there's the added intrigue of Djokovic being with ATP Tour Finals. It's different. If the roof is closed, though, does that favour Djokovic? What do you think, actually, out of interest, Ash, before we wrap it up? If the roof's closed, because it could be, we don't know what the weather's like. If the roof's closed, who does it favour? And if the roof's open, who does it favour, do you think?
Hard to say. I'd probably give Novak a nod with the roof closed. The one thing I wonder, though, with the roof closed is if the crowd are really on his back, the volume goes up when the roof when the roof is closed.
Yeah.
And that could go one of two ways, right? It can either channel his motivation and will to win even more, or it could literally get on top of him. And as you said, I think the crowd are going to be strongly in favour of Carlos. They love him here, and rightly so. He seems like a super likable guy. I'd give the nod to Djokovic if the roof is closed.
Okay.
I feel it's a British summer, so you never know.
Yeah.
We'll see what the forecast says. Usually the forecast is wrong.
Yeah.
I'd probably give Djokovic a nod, but it's hard one to say. What do you think?
I think Djokovic has a slightly better chance if the roof is closed. I would still pick Alcaraz, but someone mentioned in the comments for one of the previous pods that when the roof is closed, because it's not an indoor tournament, right? So when the roof is closed, the humidity levels go through the roof, and that actually means the ball gets heavier. And Carlos puts a lot more spin on the ball and is able to put a lot more spin on the ball anyway than Novak. So that could be an advantage. But the one thing that will be an advantage for Novak is, I think, the serve. And let's be honest, I don't think he loves the wind and the conditions, the outdoor conditions. He's obviously won 24 slams, so he's able to play extremely well in those conditions. But I think if he was to have a preference, maybe he can correct me. Maybe I'll ask him in the presser, but he'll probably bat me away. But I think indoor hard courts is the surface where he is unreal.
Yeah.
And I get that he's won the Australian Open X amount of times, and he won Wimbledon X amount of times. I get it. He's just a phenomenal all-round player. But the sweet spot for a surface for me is that indoor hard court. And I just think with the roof closed, I think it helps him a little bit. With the roof open, Alcaraz can kind of vary up a bit more. He can try and use the wind, use the conditions to his advantage. But he's not at that Nadal level when Nadal would really utilise those conditions, right? Those outdoor conditions. I don't think Alcaraz is quite the same. He's a different type of player. But it'll be interesting to see whether that plays a part. If it is closed, because we're going to assume it's going to be open, given that today it was for the women's. Let's see. Let's see how it goes. Guys, thank you for tuning in. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're new. If you're listening on a podcast platform, give us a follow as well. Appreciate it. If anyone's wondering, by the way, why the last few podcasts have been audio, it's because we have media accreditation for Wimbledon, so we're only allowed to record audio, long form audio anyway. So we can do a 1-minute video, which me and Ash will probably do later, wrapping up the women's. But you might be listening to this after, so you might be thinking, what's he talking about? Who knows when we'll release this. Anyway, guys, thanks so much, and we'll see you soon. Enjoy the men's final, and we'll catch up with you guys after.